The paper was not just a contract, it was a chain. Cashin scrawled his name at the bottom with a flick of his wrist, the ink as dark and final as his mood. He was a man who built an empire on fear, a king in a world of shadows. To secure his throne, his advisors said he needed a queen from an old, respected family. It was just business. A merger. He imagined the woman on the other side of this deal would be just like the others he knew, sharp, experienced, and understanding the cold rules of their world. He expected a partner in pretense, not a person. The day she arrived, the air in his grand house changed. Elodie did not stride in. She was ushered, a silent ghost in a simple white dress. Cashin watched from his study window, his eyes narrowing. She was smaller than he had pictured, her shoulders slightly hunched as if trying to disappear into herself. Her hair, the color of dark honey, fell in soft waves, hiding her profile. There was no boldness, only a quiet stillness that put his senses on alert. This was not what he had paid for. Their first meeting was in the grand hall. His men stood like statues along the walls, their presence meant to intimidate. Cashin stood in the center, a mountain of tailored black silk and simmering power. When Elodie was brought before him, she kept her eyes fixed on the floor. Annoyance, sharp and hot, flared within him. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice low but cutting through the silence like a whip. She flinched, a tiny, almost invisible movement, before slowly lifting her gaze. Her eyes were the color of a stormy sea, and in their depths he saw not calculation, but pure, unguarded fear. It was so genuine, so out of place, that it threw him. This was no seasoned player. This was a scared girl. The wedding was a spectacle of lies. The church was filled with people who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. Cashin played his part perfectly, the powerful, slightly bored groom. But when he took Elodie's hand to slide the ring onto her finger, he felt it. A fine, constant tremor ran through her, a vibration of pure terror. Her skin was ice-cold despite the warm room. She kept her eyes downcast, her long lashes casting shadows on her pale cheeks. She recited her vows in a whisper so faint he had to lean in to hear, her breath catching on the words, "forever." He felt a strange, unwelcome twist in his chest. This was wrong. This delicate, trembling creature did not belong in his harsh world. The reception was a blur of noise and false congratulations. Elodie stood by his side, a beautiful, silent statue. She didn't eat, she barely sipped her wine. Cashin found his attention constantly drifting back to her, his initial annoyance slowly being replaced by a prickling sense of confusion. Who was this girl? Why was she so afraid? Finally, the long, painful day was over. The last of the guests were gone, and the heavy doors of his private wing closed behind them with a soft, final click. They were alone. The air in the spacious sitting room was thick and still. Elodie stood frozen in the center of the ornate rug, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff. Cashin poured himself a drink, the amber liquid swirling in the crystal glass. He studied her over the rim. This was the moment. This was what the contract was for. This was the transaction to be completed. "This is how it will be," he said, his tone flat and businesslike. He set his glass down with a sharp click. "You are my wife in name. Now you will be my wife in truth. It is part of our agreement." He moved toward her, not with passion, but with purpose. He was a man used to taking what was his. As he got closer, the fear in her eyes didn't just linger, it exploded. A silent plea screamed from her whole being. She took a stumbling step back, hitting the edge of a sofa, her breath coming in quick, shallow pants. "Please," she whispered, the word a broken sound. "Please, what?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. He stopped directly in front of her, his large frame blocking out the light from the lamp. He reached out, not to hurt her, but to touch her arm, to pull her closer and get this over with. The moment his fingers made contact with her bare skin, she gasped and squeezed her eyes shut, as if bracing for a blow. A single tear escaped, tracing a glistening path down her cheek. And in that moment, Cashin saw everything. He saw the way she trembled at his simple touch. He saw the raw, untouched innocence in her panicked expression. He saw the way she held herself, a fortress that had never been breached. The pieces clicked into place with the force of a physical blow. Her family. They were old-fashioned, fiercely protective of their reputation. Her quiet nature. Her sheer, unacting terror. It wasn't that she didn't want this, it was that she had no idea what this was. She had never been with a man before. The realization struck Cashin like a bucket of ice water. He had dealt with liars and thieves, with men who would kill for a price. He knew every trick, every deception. But this raw, honest vulnerability was a language he didn't speak. He had prepared for a battle of wits, not for the utter surrender of an innocent. He thought he was acquiring a used, knowing asset, but he had been given a sealed, priceless treasure. His hand, still on her arm, gentled its hold. The hard set of his jaw softened. The cold, businesslike fury that had driven him all day evaporated, leaving behind a shocking and unfamiliar feeling, protectiveness. This changed everything. To proceed would not be claiming a right, it would be a destruction. It would be breaking something beautiful and rare, just because he could. He looked down at her tightly shut eyes and tear-streaked face, and made a decision that sent a tremor through his own soul. He slowly, carefully, dropped his hand from her arm. Elodie flinched at the movement, waiting for the assault. When it didn't come, she cautiously cracked open her eyes. She found him simply staring at her, his expression unreadable, a storm of new thoughts raging behind his dark eyes. Without a word, Cashin took a deliberate step back, putting a safe, respectful distance between them. The air crackled with the tension of his unexpected retreat. He turned and walked to the door of the bedroom, pausing with his hand on the frame. He didn't look back at her when he spoke, his voice rough with an emotion he himself didn't understand. "Sleep," he said, the single word a command, but also a promise. "The room is yours. I will not trouble you tonight." Then he was gone, pulling the door shut behind him, leaving Elodie alone in the vast, silent room, more confused and shocked than she had been all day. The chain of the contract had just been broken, and neither of them knew what would happen next. The silence that followed Cashin's retreat was louder than any shout. Elodie stood frozen in the center of the room, her body still braced for a pain that never came. The click of the door was a sound that seemed to split her world in two. One moment, she had been facing a terrifying, inevitable fate. The next, she was alone, wrapped in a bewildering and fragile safety. She didn't move for a long time, listening to the frantic hammering of her own heart slowly settle into a confused, steady rhythm. He was gone. The beast had looked at its prey and chosen to walk away. She slid to the floor, the thick rug soft beneath her, and buried her face in her hands, not crying in sorrow, but trembling with the shock of a reprieve she never dared to hope for. Cashin, on the other side of the door, leaned his head against the cool wood, his own breath a ragged thing in his throat. His study, where he would now spend the night, felt alien and cold. The image of her, so small and terrified, was burned onto the back of his eyelids. He, a man who commanded armies of shadows, had been undone by a single tear. The contract on his desk, which had seemed so clear and logical, now felt like a vile, ugly thing. He had not married a partner, he had acquired a sacrifice. The thought sickened him. For the first time in his adult life, Cashin felt the sharp, uncomfortable sting of shame. The next morning dawned bright, its cheerfulness an insult to the turmoil inside the house. Elodie, who had slept little, dressed carefully, steeling herself for the new day. Would he be angry? Would he demand what he had foregone the night before? She crept out of the room, her steps hesitant. She found him not at the grand dining table, but at a small table on the sunlit terrace overlooking the gardens. He stood as she approached, a gesture of formality that felt strangely old-fashioned. "Good morning," he said, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. It wasn't the soft voice of a gentle man, but the controlled tone of a man trying very hard to be one. "Good morning," she whispered back, her eyes fixed on the floral pattern of the tablecloth. He pulled out her chair for her. The simple, gentlemanly act shocked her more than his anger would have. They ate in a silence that was heavy, but not hostile. He didn't press her. He didn't demand. He simply let her be. After breakfast, instead of leaving for his work, He surprised her again. "The gardens are extensive," he stated, not looking at her. "It is easy to get lost. I could show you the way to the rose garden if you wish." It wasn't a command. It was an offer. A question. Elodie, her curiosity now piqued by this new, puzzling version of her husband, gave a small, hesitant nod. That walk was the first thread. He walked slowly, matching his long strides to her smaller steps. He didn't touch her. He simply pointed out things. A rare white peacock that strutted near a fountain, the history of a particular ancient statue. He spoke about the land, the business of the estate, things that were safe and solid. And then, as they stood surrounded by the dizzying scent of blooming roses, he asked his first real question. "Why did you agree to this, Elodie?" He said her name. Not wife. Not you. Her name. It sounded like a confession on his lips. She wrapped her arms around herself, watching a bumblebee drone lazily from one flower to the next. The truth felt too heavy to say aloud. But his silence was patient, a space for her to fill if she chose. And something in her, a tiny, frozen part, began to thaw. "My father," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "He is a good man, but not a careful one. He made promises to dangerous people. He owed a great deal of money. More than we could ever pay." She took a shaky breath. "Your men came. They offered a solution. A marriage. They said it would clear all the debts, that it would protect my younger brother and sister. They said it was an honor." She finally risked a glance at him. "What choice did I have?" Cashin watched her, seeing not just a girl, but a daughter, a sister. A person with a history, with people she loved enough to sacrifice her entire life for. He saw the weight of that sacrifice in the weary slope of her shoulders. He had thought her family had sold her for influence. Instead, they had been saved by her courage. The shame he felt the night before deepened, twisting into something else, a profound, aching respect. "You have a brother and sister?" he asked, his voice gentler. And so, the wall began to crumble. She told him about her brother's dream of being a painter, her sister's love for silly, romantic novels. She spoke of a home that was loud and messy and full of love, a world away from the cold, perfect silence of his mansion. Day bled into day. Their walks became a ritual. The conversations slowly shifted from her life to his. He didn't tell her the dark things, the things that happened in the shadows. But he told her about being a young boy, thrust into a position of power he never asked for. He spoke of the loneliness of command, of never knowing who to trust. He had built walls around himself so high, he'd forgotten what it was like to have someone on the other side. A real friendship was growing in the space between them, tender and green as a spring shoot. He made her laugh, a real, genuine laugh, one day by telling a funny story about the white peacock chasing one of his sternest guards. The sound was so bright and unexpected that it seemed to startle them both. Cashin found he would do almost anything to hear it again. The shift from friendship to something more was as natural as a sunrise. It began with a touch. They were in the library, and he reached to take a heavy book from her hands. His fingers brushed against hers. This time, she did not flinch. She did not pull away. A simple touch, but it sent a current through them both, a silent acknowledgement of the new world they were building. That night, he did not leave her at her door. He paused, his hand resting on the frame, much like he had on their wedding night. But this time, everything was different. "Elodie," he said, her name a question. She looked up at him, her stormy sea eyes clear and steady. The fear was gone. In its place was a nervous anticipation, a trust that had been earned day by day, word by word. She gave a small, certain nod. He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. This time, there was no cold purpose, no sense of a transaction. He stood before her and slowly, giving her every chance to refuse, lifted his hand to her cheek. His touch was warm, his thumb stroking her skin with a reverence that made her heart ache. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his dark eyes searching hers. "And I will. Always." "Don't stop," she breathed back. What followed was a slow, gentle discovery. It was not the claiming of a right, but the sharing of a gift. He was endlessly patient, his hands and lips learning her, not taking but asking. Every new touch was a question, and every soft sigh from her was an answer. He worshipped her with his patience, making sure she felt not just safe, but cherished. The world outside, the business, the danger, all of it faded into a distant hum. For Elodie, the fear was replaced by a warmth that spread from her core, a feeling of being truly seen, not as a bargaining chip, but as a woman. For Cashin, the cold fortress around his heart finally crumbled, not under an assault, but under the gentle, persistent weight of a love he never knew he needed. Later, as she lay curled against his side, her head on his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart, she knew. This was not a contract. This was a beginning. He held her close, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare arm, and he knew it too. The shocking twist of their first night had not been a setback. It had been the key that unlocked both their hearts, leading them here, to this quiet intimacy, to this promise of a forever that was chosen, not just sworn. The first thing Elodie felt was warmth. A solid, steady warmth against her back and the heavy, comforting weight of an arm draped possessively over her waist. Sunlight, soft and golden with the early hour, filtered through the elegant curtains, painting stripes of light across the rumpled silk sheets. She blinked slowly, the memories of the night before washing over her not in a shocking wave, but in a gentle, warm tide. There was no regret, no lingering fear. Only a profound, quiet sense of rightness. She started to shift, and the arm around her tightened instinctively, pulling her closer. Cashin was still asleep, his face relaxed in slumber, the harsh lines of command and suspicion smoothed away. In sleep he looked younger, vulnerable. She watched the steady rise and fall of his chest, feeling the rhythm against her back. This was the most feared man in the city, and he was holding her as if she were the most precious thing he had ever possessed. As if sensing her wakefulness, his breathing changed. His eyes fluttered open, and for a single, heart-stopping moment, Elodie wondered if the night had been a dream. Would the cold, distant man return? Would he retreat behind his walls? His dark eyes focused on her, still soft with sleep. Then, a slow, genuine smile touched his lips, a sight so rare and beautiful it made her breath catch. It wasn't a smirk or a gesture of triumph. It was a smile of pure, unguarded happiness. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep, a low, intimate rumble that vibrated through her. "Good morning," she whispered back, her own lips curving in response. He didn't say anything else for a long moment. He simply looked at her, his gaze tracing the lines of her face as if memorizing them. His hand, which had been resting on her waist, moved, his fingers splaying across her stomach, his touch a brand of ownership that was no longer about a contract, but about devotion. "The deal is over," he said, his voice low and certain, filling the sunlit room. "It is null and void. From this moment, there is no contract. There is only us." Elodie turned in his arms to face him fully, her stormy sea eyes meeting his dark, intense gaze. "There is only you," she repeated, the words a vow. "Elodie," he began, his tone shifting, becoming more serious. "I have spent my life building an empire on threats and fear. I thought strength was in never showing weakness, in never caring for anyone enough for them to become a target. But you—" He brushed a stray strand of honey-colored hair from her cheek. "You have become my only strength. You are more important to me than any business, any deal, any power. I promise you, with everything that I am, that I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this. I will protect you, I will cherish you. This marriage, our marriage, is real. It is from my heart." Tears welled in Elodie's eyes, but they were not tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of overwhelming joy, of a feeling of home she had never known she was searching for. She reached up, her hand cupping his rough cheek, feeling the faint stubble beneath her palm. "My heart was a locked room," she said softly. "I thought I was giving you the key to save my family. I didn't know you would use it not to take, but to stay. You walked into that room and you filled it with light." She leaned forward, until their foreheads were touching, their breath mingling. "My heart is yours, Cashin. It is yours forever. That first night I was so scared. I thought it was the end of everything I knew. But it was just the beginning of us. The scary twist of their wedding night, the moment he had seen her terror and stepped back, had not been a failure. It had been the first, crucial crack in his armor, the moment a king had chosen mercy over power. It had allowed Cashin to discover that beneath the layers of a ruthless mafia boss, there was a man capable of profound kindness and love. And for Elodie, it had been the trial by fire that revealed her own incredible strength. The strength to face her fears, to trust again, and to claim a happiness she never thought she deserved. Their life together was not a simple fairy tale. The shadows of his world still lingered at the edges. There were still dangerous men and difficult decisions. But now they faced them together. Elodie was no longer a scared girl in a gilded cage. She was his partner, his confidant, the calm at the center of his storm. Her gentle strength became his secret weapon, her honest perspective a guide he learned to trust implicitly. He brought her brother to the estate, providing him with a master artist to study under. He ensured her sister had the finest education, her future secure and bright. He didn't just protect Elodie, he loved the people she loved, weaving the family she missed into the fabric of their new life. Years later, standing on the same terrace where they had taken their first tentative walk together, Cashin would hold her from behind, his arms wrapped around her as they watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The white peacock, now old and dignified, still strutted near the fountain. It all started with a contract. He would whisper into her hair, his voice filled with a wonder that never faded. Elodie would lean back into his embrace, a contented smile on her face. "No," she would correct him gently, placing her hand over his, where it rested against her heart. It all started when a powerful man chose to be a good one. It started with you. Their story was a testament to the fact that the most powerful bonds are not forged in blood or business, but in choice, in patience, and in the courageous decision to be vulnerable with the one you love. It was a promise made not on paper, but in the quiet of a bedroom and the warmth of a shared sunrise. A promise of forever, kept every single day. We hope you were swept away by Cashin and Elodie's journey from a cold contract to a burning, forever love. If this story touched your heart, please show your support by hitting that subscribe button and ringing the notification bell so you never miss one of our romantic tales. We love hearing from you. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what you thought about the story. Were you shocked when Cashin walked away on their wedding night? Did you cheer when they finally found their happy beginning? Share your thoughts down below. We read every single one. Thank you for watching, and we can't wait to share the next epic romance with you.